This next book that I want to review for you guys is sort of a minor classic in German literature. It is The Confusions of Young Torless by Robert Musil. And you can see the pictures of the group of young boys there. If I hold it up closer, you can see the exorbitant price I spent on the book, but also the boys in formation with their swords ready to go and fight and be good little soldiers for the Kaiser. Despite its obvious second-class status behind Robert Musil's much more canonical and well-regarded novel, The Man Without Qualities, this novel's reputation still precedes it, and it's still fairly well known. Sometimes this can present an interpretive problem, and I think that's what happens with this book. Considering the overt mixture of both violence and masochism in their relationship to especially political power, and the date of the publication, which was 1906. The book is over 100 years old now, but still reads like something that could have been written very recently, I think. Musil's novel is bound to be read as a critique of what he saw coming, i.e. German fascism, World War I, Hitler's rise to power, and the resentment of losing World War I and World War II, and all of the horrible things that happened thereafter. Basically, the failure and the abdication of Kaiser Wilhelm II, right, and the promise of a democratic Weimar Republic, and the eventual rise, after the Weimar Republic's failure, the eventual rise of the National Socialists and the breakdown of liberal parliamentarism as Germany had known it up until that point, right? Of course, Musil is seeing all of this in his crystal ball. That's a very easy way to read this book. And there are certain instances in which political circumstances are paramount in the consideration of a piece of fiction. I would never argue that this book is an exception. However, to argue that Musil anticipated something like the rise of fascism an entire generation before it came to be would be to commit the critical mistake of a posteriori reasoning. The book itself is horrifying, without any knowledge of pre-Weimar Germany, but the entire piece, essentially a novel-length reflection on the brutality of power gone awry, can be read with political implications still. The novel opens with a young boy named Torless being delivered by his sort of blithely unsuspecting parents to an all-boys boarding school. The events revolve around Torless, whose first name we never learned, his last name, and three other boys named Reiting, Beineberg, and Bassini. One day, Torless, Reiting, and Beineberg catch Bassini, who is a young, very slender, smaller, effeminate boy, stealing some money from one of the fellow boys, and they begin to threaten and ostracize him over it, and in time, this sort of mild emotional and physical abuse grows into something that's really, really serious and disturbing. And eventually, Reiting and Beineberg take turns, basically violently raping Bassini over a period of weeks or months. Instead of evoking a feeling of pure disgust in Torless, he gets this complex mixture of sort of a pure sexual passion and moral confusion ensues, which provides the forward momentum for the rest of his reflections and therefore for the rest of the novel. Torless's own less than ambiguous homosexuality only adds to his feeling as an outsider and to his confusions. He is at once physically drawn to Bassini's small, tender, epicene physique, but revolted by the violence that he endures at the hands of those who he thought to be his friends. When Torless finally advises Bassini to report his abuse to superiors, a formal investigation comes to an unsurprising conclusion, but I don't want to spoil that ending here. During the testimony, Torless gives a sort of bewilderingly fascinating speech on the nature of the rational and the irrational. And it consists of an expansion on what writing says earlier in the novel in regards to torturing Bassini, this poor little effeminate, weak boy. Writing says, if everyone, and there are not many, contributes just enough, let me start over again. If everyone contributes just enough to tear him to pieces. I like these mass movements as a rule. No one intends to do anything in particular, and yet the waves grow ever higher and higher until they crash together over everyone's heads. You'll see, no one will stir, yet there will be a raging storm. It gives me extraordinary pleasure to stage something like that. Words like these from the mouths of babes make it easier to understand why the confusions of young Torless is so easily read as Musil trying to be yet another author prognosticator. Just a wonderful little book, fictional meditation on power and how horrible it can be if it's used irresponsibly. The Confusions of Young Torless by Robert Musil.